Is everyone able to see that? Good. Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Frida Mendez Arce, and I would first like to thank you for taking the time to be with us this Sunday morning and to listen to all the amazing projects my fellow classmates and I have been working on. My honors project is entitled The Online Representation of People with Disabilities in State and Local Government. This framework led to the creation of Accessibility, the final product for my honors project. I would be dismissed if I don't thank my amazing mentor, Dr. Sarah Hill. Dr. Hill has been so supportive even through the most unpredictable times. So thank you for everything and for allowing me to explore this topic of representation in government, which I know is something that is important to her as well. So thank you, thank you. Now I will transition into the initial phases of my project. I thought it was important for me to provide some background as to why I decided to center my project around the online representation of people with disabilities in state and local government. For starters, I have always enjoyed working with the community of people with disabilities. This grew out of my relationship with my cousin who has autism and realizing how society disregards people with disabilities at all levels. This is actually me at Tuffy's Friends, a community service program at Cal State Fullerton, which fosters friendships between students at Cal State Fullerton and adults with varying disabilities in the surrounding area. I have also always pushed for the representation of all communities in all levels of government because with adequate representation, the changes communities want to see will at least be considered. According to a 2019 report by the CDC, 1 in every 4 adults in America live with some type of disability. Despite this community being such a large part of the population, there are no accurate or available statistics on the number of people with disabilities serving in elected offices at any level of government, although the numbers are expected to be low. I decided to tackle this issue by exploring a medium that I recently became very interested in public interest technology. Public interest technology is a time worthy field because it applies technical expertise to advance public good and public interest, especially for those who have been underserved historically and currently by systems and policies. With a combination of all three things, accessibility was born. The name for accessibility stems from the word accessibility, but I decided to capitalize the B because I wanted visitors to feel like they could be themselves and find empowerment in that. Accessibility was designed as a possible solution to the lack of involvement of people with disabilities in state and local government in California, to be specific. A public interest technology lens was taken for this project, where web accessibility was explored by centralizing already available resources on one website. This centralization is intended to facilitate the process of finding these resources and consequently make it easier for people with disabilities to jumpstart their involvement in government. An important aspect of my website was highlighting the stories of people already in state and local positions for those struggling with imposter syndrome, considering if they are able to get into government or not. With this, here's a preview of Accessibility's homepage. Accessibility was created on Wix.com because of time constraints on the project. On this page, you will find the mission and core beliefs of accessibility. Up here on the right, underneath the accessibility name and logo, you will find the 8 pages that comprise this website. Those include an About Us, Northern California, Central California, Southern California, the B Center, story highlights, and ally resources. I will be going over some of these pages in the following slides. While I can't go into the entire background of web accessibility, the gist of web accessibility is that websites, tools, and technologies are designed and developed so that people with disabilities can use them. There's a lot of background that goes into web accessibility, but it can be thought of in this acronym POUR: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. This simple framework it can be considered when working towards web accessibility. This framework was utilized in the creation of all pages on accessibility, including Northern, Central, and Southern California, where varying resources were compiled, such as club, legal resources, jobs, etc., so that they could be appropriate to the region for the visitor visiting my website. Web accessibility is an ongoing process and is something that I am still adjusting in my own website. As previously mentioned, story highlights were one of my focus in the creation of accessibility. This was the more difficult part of the project because there were few people that fit into the category I was looking to highlight, and sometimes it was just hard to hear a response back. Besides these difficulties, I was able to interview a couple of people, but for the purposes of this presentation, I will be highlighting Ligia Andrade Zuniga, a board trustee for the San Mateo Union High School District Board. Systemic issues, allyship, and issues during the COVID-19 pandemic were some of the highlights of my interview with Ligia. Ligia was elected into this position in November of 2020. In 2009, Ligia was involved in a car accident that severed her spine, and as a result, she is a C5-C6 quadriplegic. As a C5-C6 quadriplegic, Liga has little function in her hands and requires a lot of assistance. She believes that governance is the most effective way to achieve social justice through policy that is going to change these systems. She stated, "We need leadership that reflects our communities to instill and create change." In her current position, she learned that her biggest challenge for leadership was finding care. If Liga is not able to find the care she needs, she is not able to get out of bed and represent her community. When discussing the transition to being in local government during a pandemic, Liga attested that there is both good and bad that comes with this. For one, she said that it was great for access. She believes that it has given her an equal playing field because she did not have to canvass in person. However, because she didn't have to canvass in person, she was sad that people could not see her chair, which made her question if she was being effective in her campaign. Even today in the virtual world, Ligia considers care to be one of the biggest struggles as an elected official. She mentioned that she had been stuck in bed for weeks, which had prevented her from physically being able to be at meetings. On some occasions, she would show herself in bed, which she knows is unprofessional. She went on to say that she wants to connect with people, but for example, if she needs to be at an event at 8 in the morning, a caregiver has to be at her house by 4 in the morning for her to be ready, which is something able bodied people do not consider when planning events. When it came to campaigning, Liga expressed that the financial reality of people with disabilities is based on the hold that government has on them. She was concerned that if she created a campaign account and it started attracting money, she would lose her healthcare benefits, which provided the little care she is able to get. With this being said, with these issues being highlighted, Liga has various changes she would like to see implemented into her government so that more people with disabilities can get involved. She stressed that reform for campaign financing is crucial to getting more elected officials with disabilities into office. For web accessibility, Ligia wanted to remind people that web access in general is a privilege that some cannot afford, so this has to be part of the conversation as well. As a word of advice for people with disabilities seeking to get involved into government, she said, "Do it, influence change. Don't be scared to own your power and represent that. Be careful of the imposter syndrome or people silencing your voice. Make sure you don't allow people to do that." She believes that if allies really listen to people with disabilities and bring people with disabilities into spaces so that they can advocate for themselves, together they can work towards equitable representation in government. The last two pages you will see on accessibility are entitled "The Bee Center" and "Ally Resources." While doing research for this project, a common thread I found was that people with disabilities found it difficult to even talk about political engagement because they simply didn't have the community to talk about political issues with. To address this, I created the Bee Center. I wanted to create a space where visitors were able to interact with one another, whether this is by posting articles or chats about issues that could or could not be related to people with disabilities. By creating this interactive space, people with disabilities across California could interact with one another to have these political conversations and support one another. Another page I found imperative to include into my website was one for ally resources. I consider myself an ally to the community of people with disabilities. An important lesson I learned throughout this project was the desperate need for reshaping advocacy and the labor that we as allies must do. I met Stephanie Page, an equity professional, who designed a session to help attendees understand how our identity has influenced our lived experience to help us understand inequities. She stated that it was hard not to fall into savior complex because our society operates under the notion that people need to be saved instead of seeing it through the lens that systems need to be changed. While avoiding a savior complex was next to impossible, Stephanie did mention that allies must enter into communities knowing that they will eventually have to give up some of their powers so that disenfranchised communities like people with disabilities can be on equal footing. These pages, this page included resources and tools for allies to address issues like campaign accessibility, which is something that Ligia mentioned, to move towards this equitable representation. This honors project has taught me more than I could have ever imagined. This project reiterated that there is not enough representation of people with disabilities in state and local government, especially when considering the percentage of the population with disabilities in the United States as a whole. This underrepresentation can be further exacerbated when web accessibility is not taken seriously and applied. Therefore, conversations around accessibility on and offline need to continue beyond this context. I would also like to refocus on public interest technology as it is an avenue that needs more attention as it can help many communities in varying ways. If we also add the reshaping of allyship to allow people with disabilities to advocate for themselves, we will see a representation of people with disabilities not only in state and local government, but in all aspects. It is not only what people with disabilities need, but it is what they deserve. I would like to thank the honors program for allowing us students to work on these important issues that I know we all care about. I hope you are all able to carry at least one lesson from this project and apply it to your own community. And I will now hand my time back over so we can transition into questions.